This meeting is being recorded.
So welcome everyone, and to this live Move into the Future and Wize Move Society talk. And we're recording this session to share on YouTube, Facebook, and on LinkedIn. So we're happy to have you join us. The focus of our conversations that we have are on the 50+ generation, which is living longer, healthier, more active, and better educated than ever before. We hope to give you a glimpse as to what's happening online on the Wize Move platform as well, and to share a bit about the challenges, opportunities the 50+ generation is facing. If you aren't a Wize Move Society member yet, we hope these conversations will trigger you to consider becoming so. And yep, I just had to click away on the live stream. Yeah, we're really wanting to be part of the solutions needed to play an active role in society, to continue to play an active role in society and the economy, tapping into our knowledge, experience, and wisdom. So for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, please join our conversation. This is always how we do it. And if you've joined on Facebook, please share your thoughts and questions in the comments. Elsa B, who's here, is going to be keeping an eye on the Facebook page. My name is Mary Jane Roy, and I'm sitting in for Ingen Bohl, who is the founder of Move into the Future and the Wize Move Society. I am a member and thought leader for the Wize Move Society, and I bring a bit of the perspective that we're trying to bring across, having started a new business 11 years ago at the age of 56 as a trainer facilitator for organizations, and primarily in the areas of building employee resiliency skills, creating those strategies needed for staying power. My co-host today, as always with Ingen as well, is Dr. Tatiana Rowson. And the topic for today is the importance of being earnest. And our guest today is Dorian Dandridge. And Dorian, just as a brief introduction and then you can carry on for your own perspective. Dorian has had a varied career, both as an entrepreneur and in organizations. And when I read his background, it's really through a series of circumstances that he became an advisor consultant for companies in L&D, learning and development, until IKEA hired him as an innovative learning designer, where he stayed until he retired. He's fascinated by how different generations learn, and his observations have led him to a greater understanding of what's needed to create a successful multi-generational workforce. And this is going to be a focus of ours in the coming months and years. Dorian is going to share some of his learnings with us today. And so Tatiana, I'm passing over to you so you can introduce yourself, and then we'll have Dorian take the mic, so to speak.
Okay, thank you, Mary Jane. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are, what time you're joining us. It's nice to be here. I'm really pleased Dorian's joining us because we had several very interesting conversations offline in different occasions, and I think that for sure that will be an interesting conversation today. So I am a psychologist, well, no one's perfect, and an academic, and I research midlife and what happens in that stage of life that can impact later on. So I'm really interested in working life, but I'm interested as well in health and well-being, and how can we keep that health and well-being going in later years. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Dorian. Thank you, Dorian.
Hi, well, thank you for having me. It's an interesting thing because I'm not doing much. I'm fitting a kitchen at the moment, and I'm playing with my motorcycles and all those other things that you do after you've stopped working. And it's really interesting and quite nice to be asked to talk about work or things at work. So I came up with the title, well, I didn't come up with the title, Oscar Wilde did, but Oscar Wilde had a great play called The Importance of Being Earnest. And the thing is that being earnest is priceless. It's fantastic. And I love it when young people show their sort of excitement and their verve and their risk taking and all the ingredients that make someone earnest. I sort of smile quietly because I can't be that anymore. And that's the conundrum. We have a workplace with a diverse workforce of different ages in particular, which is what we're talking about. And those people coming into the workplace are young, vibrant, excited, and they want to volunteer for everything, and everything's cool. And when they get invited to a training, it's yes, wow, that's amazing. Yet if I'm thinking of some of the people I've met in the past who are in their 50s perhaps or more, when they were invited to a training, it was a big groan and a thought like, oh no, not again. And that's the sort of this is the puzzle that I like to think about, and that's what I wanted to talk about, or at least have a conversation about with any of you and all of you. Because those young, earnest people who come into the workforce, they're met by people like us, the older generation, who are not taking the risks so much anymore. They've been there, they've done it, they've seen it, they've written the book. And what they want is a steady status quo. They don't want things to change too much. They don't want upheaval. They don't want change programs because they've done the change programs over and over and over. But if you're young and new, a change program is brilliant. It's the most exciting thing that could happen at work. So how do we work with these two completely different types of people at work? How do we do it? How does the older generation accept and understand that it's okay and perfectly acceptable to be earnest? And how can younger people get to grips with the older generation who tend to be risk averse, and they tend to be, let's say, risk assessors, because they're not necessarily being negative, but it seems like they're being negative when they come up with a list of reasons why we shouldn't do something. So that's the introduction to being earnest at work. So if anyone has any questions, then we can get the ball rolling.
Well, I guess my first question would be, and Tatiana, again, jump in as well, but my first question, Dorian, is then how do we bridge this? How do we create that collaboration, respect, etc. for again, I think my first thought is we have to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's probably not being addressed.
No, I think for me, I gave I said some words in my little introduction. I said, it's fantastic to be earnest. And I think that if everyone began to think about how fantastic it is to have that young, vibrant excitement about life, a universe and work, if we understand that and have that same feeling of admiration, then we can start to accept it much more readily. But sadly, as we get older, we don't necessarily get wiser. We get a little bit more jaded and a little bit more fed up with the continual change at work that doesn't seem to support the need for stability that the older generation want. So I think that by admiring being earnest, that can be a start, perhaps.
So the word that comes into my mind, appreciation.
Yeah, appreciate it, because it's the vitality of if you like, a startup. I mean, you know, there are many startups going on around the world, and it's that excitement that you get with a startup that young people tend to bring to the party. That doesn't mean that the older people can't have that excitement and that vitality, but it's more the preserve of the young. That's how it is.
Tatiana.
Thank you. No, I think Dorian touched on very interesting points. I would say the one I liked the most when you said not risk averse, risk assessors,
Yes.
because we've seen it before, and we know how it ends up, and I think that's something about experience that sometimes is overlooked, that experience of having passed through different changes before and knowing what is tokenistic change and knowing what is really going to make a difference.
Yes.
On the short term or long term or whatever, in any level. And in a way, one of the things we look in research is this idea of stereotypes, when we stereotype people as just risk averse and resistant to change, or reckless, young, impulsive, and all these negative stereotypes. Then you stop using the benefits of the difference. We stop harvesting what can we get out of these different perspectives.
Yes. Yeah,
and I quite like risk assessors as sort of just give a nice spin to that experience.
But it's actually true, and I've experienced it. You know, I've experienced being in a group where I came up with a number of things that we should be aware of and be careful of on the journey, and then there was this sort of complete reflection on me as being negative. And I said, I looked at everyone and I said, no, not at all. You know, I'm very, very positive. As a person, I'm very positive. So I said, it's not in my nature to come up with all the negatives, but it is in my nature to look at the plan and look at the future and see what things do we need to avoid on that journey. But again, it's an interesting thing, and I used to say that. I used to say exactly the same. I said, "Look, I'm assessing the risk. I'm not trying to sabotage the journey." That's it.
I love, Tatiana, what you said about harvesting the differences. I think we could, you know, I think we could even have a talk around that topic on its own. What comes to my mind is as you're speaking, Dorian, is also that, you know, as we age and we've had all these experiences behind us, and you've seen the successes and the failures, that the way our brain works. And Tatiana, maybe you can touch on it more, because it's just an idea that has come into me, but it's about the how we filter information as we, you know, and again, we've got a lot more experiences to filter through than if I was 25, right, and just starting into my career. So how does Tatiana, maybe for you and then Dorian, but Tatiana, can you explain, do you have an idea of what it is that I'm trying to bring across here?
Yes, I do. It's interesting. This last week, I was touching on that, Mary-Jane, with a group of people, because someone said, oh, when you're young, you learn much quicker. Mm-hmm. And it's the same kind of how our brain works at different ages and stages. It's what we see. When we are younger, we have much more fluid intelligence. So we learn new things and new patterns very quickly. But as we age, we have a higher crystallized intelligence, which sounds negative, it's crystallized, but actually it means that we have more patterns and models and frameworks in our minds. So when we look at information, it's much quicker for us to see a pattern from that information, because we do have those patterns in our cognition, in our minds. So it's interesting that the experience allows us to see what patterns we identify from any plan, from any new adventure we set ourselves to do. And that's a very important process, because what we call contrafactual thinking, when we think everything's going to work and you say, okay, no, let's look back, because experience says these are the nagging points of the great idea. And thinking about that in a playful and creative way, maybe they are not going to be an issue, but we'll make sure we are prepared for these things if they come. So it's an interesting experiment to bring those different patterns of thinking together as we come up with solutions or prepare for change. I'm smiling because this idea of change in organizations is a constant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I maybe I could just say something, that one of the key differences that I found with learning when it came to younger people and older people was older people really want to know what's in it for me. That's the question. What's in it for me? If I do this training, or if I learn this new process, or what's in it for me? Whereas a younger person isn't thinking that way. They have a different focus. They're hungry for advancement. They're hungry to climb the ladder. And because of that and other things, they just tend to learn because they want to, because it's part of their process for getting on, and so on and so on and so on. But when you've already reached a plateau, and you've paid your mortgage, and the kids are grown up and left the nest, and so on and so on and so on, then it becomes very much a matter of, why do I need to do this? What's in it for me? I don't get it. I don't understand why I have to learn this new program. Why? And I think that comes in as well. It's not just about being earnest. It's about being in different stages of your life, and the things that drive you, motivate you, or indeed have an effect on what you learn and when you learn it and how you learn it. Those things change for every decade. They're changing. So yeah, what's in it for me is a very common cry from people after a certain age or stage, let's say, stage.
Thank you, Dorian. Deborah, you had your hand up, so I'll let you come in.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I thought maybe it would be good to give your definition of earnest. I know that it's kind of an intense conviction, a sincere conviction. And I think when we're younger, we don't have those experiences, and we have an idea, and there's a flash of an idea, and then we go up the mountain to seek the idea. But then as we get older, we kind of know that behind every flash of idea is like a lot of work. It's loaded, right? Yeah. And so that brings me to an attitude of life. Yes. If we can hold on to some kind of a thread of passion somewhere, and then we're doing what actually excites us, like you were saying earlier, that excitement can be that train that takes us along and helps younger people. We can educate younger people because we've got all those experiences that can help take them through the times where, there are challenges with putting it together. So that earnest is, it's can be fleeting, but it's very important. I agree with you to keep it as alive as possible until we're no longer going to coop.
Well, my dad is 93, and yesterday on Sunday he took delivery of a new car, And he talks about, he called me and said, yeah, I've nearly sold all my books. We printed 100 books and he's nearly sold them all. And he said, I don't know whether I should get another 100 or whether I should go for 50. And we go through all these wonderful conversations because he's talking about what's going to happen in the summer or what's happening at the end of the year. And my dad still, he's not earnest anymore, but he still has a little spark of being immortal, and that's another thing, of course, that young people tend to have as well. That's this feeling of immortality. It's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, so yes, so you said you wanted a definition of being earnest or earnest, and I don't have a pure definition. It's a feeling. It's that experience that you have when you're in the presence of someone who is being earnest, and it's that they volunteer. You know, it's like they jump in immediately without even thinking and saying, "Well, I'll do that. I can help with that. I can do that." You know, and it's just lovely.
It's more unbiased.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there are no conditions, there are no thoughts, there are no experiences around it. So let's just do it. Sadly, you know, when you get a little bit older, like you said, you know, you've got all these patterns and experiences, and you know what huge amount of work something is going to mean when you say, "I'll do that." And you know that the person really doesn't have an understanding of the reality of the effort required. But hey, you know, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about a workforce that has both ingredients, and one that we can't expect younger people to be too forgiving for the old, but we can, as older people, definitely be forgiving for the young. I do believe that. I think we can accept that they have this energy, let it go, let them have it, let them have their way, let them find out for themselves. Preaching to them isn't going to help.
No.
Yeah.
How did it work, Dorian, with the example you gave, where the group came back and said you're being very negative, etc., and you tried to explain to them where you were coming from? Were they open to that? You know?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, it wasn't just younger people. I mean, in this particular case, it was my peers. And I said, look, I've been down this road before, and I just want to say that we should be aware of this, this, and this. And we're talking about specifically things to do with learning, and with respect to a great many people. A lot of the people I had to work with didn't really understand learning, and didn't understand learning design or the aspects of getting a diverse audience to learn something new. And so I would come up with things like, you know, but we have to be careful of this, and we have to be careful of that. We have to do this. And some of my peers felt that I was being negative. And I would say, you know, I'm sorry, but it's not true. I'm a very positive person, but there are certain elements here that we need to be aware of based on previous experience. I think, yeah.
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, but I think it's slightly different when with younger people, because with younger people, you just get labeled. So they don't talk to you. They don't tell you you're being negative. They label you as negative.
Yeah.
And it's different.
One topic that comes up, or one idea that comes up in my head, is one that gets talked about a lot, but I don't know how often it's being implemented, and that is the reverse mentoring. So that you combine, yes. You know, we make as an older generations, we make great mentors for the younger, but having a younger person be able to reflect back to us, yes, what our behavior or our way of thinking, Diana, I saw you really nod. Have you got something to share in this regards?
Yes, in the research that I did, reverse mentoring was very important for the organization. And Dorian, as you were saying, just bring it back to that, I wondered about the culture of the organization.
Yes.
Whether it was more of a cultural thing where people weren't necessarily able to give those open ideas in a safe space. And it's the same with the reverse mentoring, seeing the value of the younger ones and mentoring someone from the older generation.
Yeah, I don't have a perfect answer for you, but I do have some experiences. Because as a consultant, I worked in many different organizations, but in particular engineering, British Aerospace, Alfa Laval, Tetra Pak, and so on, and Saab Gripen, come to think of it. And in those organizations, generally there is a much more of an old-fashioned hierarchical organization. But I did, of course, I also worked 10 years for IKEA, and with IKEA, there is a hierarchy, but you can move around and challenge at any level. Not everyone likes it, but it is the way, and you can do it. And so mentoring, cross-mentoring and upward mentoring in IKEA is something that doesn't happen formally, but it absolutely happens informally. So that's part of the culture, it's part of the structure, and you can do that. Maybe less so today than when I was there, because things have changed and I think it's a little stiffer. But in places like British Aerospace and so on, you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't ask for it. You wouldn't expect it, and you wouldn't put it forward as a great idea either, because you're looking at an extremely. I'm not talking about aerospace, but that type of culture is incredibly stiff and unwilling to accept new ideas. When it comes to things like coaching, mentoring, cross fertilization, and so on and so on. I don't know if that answers your question to some extent, or confirms what you're thinking or what you found yourself.
Yes, and also the other thing I was thinking when you were speaking was those that are introverted and extroverts as well. Because those that are introverted may not be giving their views in that environment, and it's very much down to the leadership to actually nurture those, isn't it?
Absolutely. I when you said it, it makes me laugh a little bit, because my mother saw me as my mother saw me as an extrovert. Now I see myself clearly as an introvert. and so it's quite interesting. So I was the entertainer at home, and so for that reason she thought I was extroverted. But when it comes to, that's an aside, but when it comes to organizations, I think the leadership is the key factor, and it always is, but not just in terms of this part of the culture, but at all levels. And allowing people to be free to express themselves, to grow within the job and grow within the group or the team and so on, is very much the role of the manager. And not all managers are capable of doing it. That's a huge topic in itself. We can't go into it particularly now, but I think that when it comes to the allowing let's put it this way, when it comes to giving freedom to an introvert to be introverted, because you can't just say, come on, snap out of it, that's not going to work. but by giving a freedom in terms of allowing them to contribute in their own way, in allowing them to work perhaps with other introverts, and then presenting their findings or their discoveries when it comes to a project and so on, rather than putting them with extroverts who will just domineer and take the pedestal and take every moment that they have to talk. The extrovert will take that away. They'll take that time away. So by being a good manager and a nurturing manager, you can actually allow those people to grow too. And as you quite rightly point out, is mainly the extroverts who will jump up and be volunteering. Because that's their want. They feed off that. They get their energy out of all that stuff. But I'm glad you brought up the fact that, of course, there are other people with other personalities as well. Yes. Well, who are you? You're Diane. You're Diane. And what do you do, Diane?
What do I do? So I am a coach, and my background's HR. So my background was with Microsoft. And so one of the examples I was going to give when Mary Jane suggested was that just recently I was doing a multi-generational presentation to students in a secondary school. And great. We invited Microsoft in to give this presentation. Yeah. And so we didn't have the older generation, although I work very closely and I coach them. And many are moving through into the career portfolio retirement model and looking for new opportunities. But I had a millennial and ex-students of the school. So the real youngsters coming through, the intern, the graduates, and then the director of education for Microsoft, actually there bringing it all together. Right. And we shared that because we were trying to get the younger ones to apply into this big organization and not necessarily go the university route. Yes. And one of the questions came up was, well, what about the ideas, and what about what's next in Microsoft world and the computer world, and will we be able to contribute to that? And one of the young guys that's on the graduate program said, again, he had lots of energy, just as you said, and he was raring to go, but he felt comfortable in the environment. And that's where I was talking about that culture. Yes. Microsoft really encourages that culture. And as he rightly said, I've got lots of great ideas. I'm able to put those ideas forward, but they don't necessarily get introduced into the business model because it's not the right. So it's that balance of, yes, we're hearing you, but at the same time, we have got the experience, and it's got to be business driven, and that one person won't have necessarily that business experience. So it's respecting others in the room.
Yes, and in their stage, whatever stage they're in, because that's I like the word stage because it includes age in it. And but stage, we are in different stages throughout our lives, and we don't necessarily correspond with an age stage. Just because I'm 30 doesn't mean that I think and feel and do exactly the same as the next person who's 30. But for me, I was married at 20 and had my first child at 21, and second child 23. So I was in a hurry. I was in an enormous hurry to do something, whatever it was. So my stage would have been quite different to someone who was marrying at 30 and having their kids in their early 30s, because I was already 10 years into it by then. So we mustn't underestimate that. And sometimes we dismiss someone who's 25 because they're 25 and they've just come from, maybe we assume they've come from university or whatever, and we think, oh yeah, but they're academic, they don't really know what they're talking about. but yet we it could well be that they've, had their own business, that they're married, that they have responsibilities, that they're looking after their parents. So we have no idea.
No.
And for that reason, we have to also accept that they have patterns, established patterns and established experiences that could be very, very helpful. But as a manager or leader, we need to allow those people to come out.
Yes, and it's all about learning about the people that we have in our teams.
Yes.
There was a good example. So my son is a rowing coach, and he's 23, and
Yes.
his leader, my son, again, that excitement went into his boss and said, well, where do you see me in the future, and what am I going to be doing? And his South African boss, of a millennial, who said sort of, well, you're 28, aren't you? Why haven't you been doing this, and why haven't you been doing this? And he said, why aren't you in teaching, and why aren't you doing a qualification? And my son said, I don't think you realize I'm 23. I've only just come out of university, and during the lockdown I did my dissertation, and I'm really keen, and this is my passion, but at the same time I don't actually want to go back into doing my qualifications at this time. I'm raring to go and being practical, and I need you. And he did. I need you to lead me and give me these examples. And a lot of my clients, and as I'm sure everyone else is finding, that the young ones are just finding that they're not getting that time, whether it's because of the hybrid working situation or with the pandemic, their role models that would have shared their wisdom are just not in the same environment. And again, there's a lot of people that are maybe of the older generation who are that different stage of their life, with nice offices at home, that safe environment where they don't want to come out and travel on a train and go into other environments. Whereas the younger ones are just saying, come on, when do I get to see you? When can you share this wisdom with me? When can we be in the same room?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really, really good point, Diane. And it's one of the things, and if you hadn't brought it up, I was just going to ask about, or share, how important these career conversations are. So Dorian, you mentioning that you might not be aware of the circumstances of your employees, but how incredibly important is it to be aware of that? And then the other thought that I had, and again, Tatiana, I don't know if you can add into this, but is about how do we nourish these conversations right up to and into the last stage or phase that people are experiencing in the workforce, because they tend to get forgotten. You've done this, you've been here, you've been on this path. So how do we nourish this?
I think that's a good point. And I know I had a conversation with Dorian about that some time ago, about how these conversations about what retirement, what do you want to do next, what's your plan, they disappear. So I agree, it's important to find time for these conversations when employees are young, or at that early stage. I like the stage. I like the whole metaphor that goes around the stage. And but later on, we seem to drop out. It seems to be a given that everyone wants the same thing. So everyone wants to just go off into a cruise somewhere, and some people might want that, other people might want other things, but no one gets to talk about it.
It's a conundrum. It's a paradox. It's a very, very strange thing to have a diverse workforce. So, I mean, I don't mean diverse in the full diversity, but we're just talking about age now. So as where where you have a workforce that contains 60 to 67-year-olds and 18, to 25-year-olds, it's a very, very difficult thing to manage. It's very hard. And there aren't any simple answers. And I think that's why we're talking about it, because we should be exploring the possibilities and exploring how can we have one document, and this is the conversation I had with you, one document for HR to give to the managers to do the development talk. And here's the, and it's the one question that makes a 65-year-old feel stupid. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And it's a great question for a 20-year-old, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. It's a great question. And it gives a chance for have a 5-year plan, and it gives a chance for development. But when you ask someone who's over 55, they start to wonder why on earth, or not why you're asking, but more about what does the company think? How stupid can a company be to ask this question of me? So you're actually putting a whole bunch of things on the table when you don't have another development plan or another development document that serves an older generation better. Because there's nothing wrong with using that with younger people, I don't think.
No, that's very true. You also said earlier about what motivates. And
Yes.
Again, it's important for the leaders to know the different motivators for the different stages in careers.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I said what's in it for me, I don't mean money.
No.
I don't mean money. One of the things that I was a big stickler for when I did learning design, to create learning designs, I would have a target group that would be a given. So people, I would be given a brief and a target group, and then I would develop a training of some description or learning intervention. One of the things that I would do as the highest importance was create a context for the learner. Because without a context, nothing happens. You don't have to do it for children. So if you take a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, a 5-year-old, 16-year-old, you don't need a context, because they're sponges, and they accept that being at school means I can just absorb everything and it will all be useful to me one day. But when you're doing this with a group of people who've come to a training, who didn't want to come to the training, who weren't, for whom it wasn't made clear what the training was for or why they have to do it, what I always made sure I did was create a very, very strong context for why they were there. So what's in it for me? And I would, really go to town with a context. And I would say that it's the same for a development talk. What's the context? Don't start with just a normal interview about, how you've performed in the past 6 months or past year, and where I see you going in the future, and then where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, and all the usual stuff. And you as an HR professional will know what I'm talking about. But I would say give a context, give a context to people over a certain age, because otherwise they don't get it. They just think that it's same old, same old. So
Dorian,
yeah.
Can you give an example? Can you think back to a learning that you gave?
Yeah. Let me think. Yeah. Okay. Here's one. I would say imagine a future with. So that's how I would do. Quite often I would do that. Imagine a future where you no longer need to call someone. I'm just pretending now. Imagine a future where there are no phones, but communication still takes place in a special way. You know, imagine. So I would come up with this, for example, if it was a training for business navigators. Okay, so a business navigator in a company who is actually steering and looking at the finances and so on. And then I would use the context like that. Imagine if you were able to control things by doing this, this, and this. Imagine if you could do that. Imagine this, imagine that. Well, this training will give you that. So that's how I would create the context, because they would then go, okay, now I'm curious. Now I want to do this training because it's now, you've tempted me. You've given me something that I can sort of hang on to, as opposed to you're here to do this training because the company expects you to be able to do it. Well, that's not very endearing or very attractive. So I would try to find something else.
I'm glad I asked you that question. I really am, because I've had my own aha moment about the trainings and facilitating that I do. So about putting that context into place for people.
Put the context. I mean, I gave you a simple one. You know, imagine a future where. But you can do it in many different ways. But the idea is that the person sitting in front of you who's just about to embark on the training buys in for themselves. They buy in. You don't sell it. You create a future scenario where things are better. I can give you another. I've just remembered another example, a better example. I did a short teaser for a group of people who were sales managers. Now, the sales managers in this particular case were bullied by everybody above them, and they were running around like headless chickens. So I created a short little movie, very short teaser, which was actually showing a fist in a glove coming towards the face of a boxer very slowly. And as it hits the boxer, the sweat springs off his forehead and his head goes across. And I said, if you feel like this, this is how it is for you. And then it went to a lake, calm lake with music in the background. And it said, if you want your life to be like this, come on the training. Come on the new training. And that was the context. It wasn't spoken, it was visual. But it was a visual context that connected with the reality of that person's role and job.
And their needs.
Yeah, that's right. And what I did was the training was sales manager training, and it was showing some methods that would allow them to make space and time, free up some time in their schedules so that they could feel a little bit calmer than they were. So again, it's not necessarily a statement, but it's a context that you create by connecting with the reality of that person's situation, if you like.
Thank you, Dorian. I think this is really interesting to bring those contexts to conversations with people, because we usually neglect. We think we all on the same boat, as if we're all sharing the same pattern of thinking and direction of travel and whatever. And bringing that context just shapes the conversation to something much more productive.
It makes a huge difference. I mean, it is huge. And even when doing presentations, I would make sure I had a context. So the context would be right at the beginning. And I did that even today, 3/4 of an hour ago. I talked about how fantastic it is to be earnest, and how wonderful it is to be earnest. And that, you know, there comes a point where you can't be that anymore. But that's trying to give a context to what this conversation might become in this hour. So for me, the context wasn't just about training and delivering learning designs, but it was about everything. So, you know, if my grandson, who's 18 and he's just started getting interested in motorbikes, I would give him a context. If I was to talk about something or about a need that he has to do something on his motorbike, I would talk about the context first, you know, some sort of context.
People are going to be much more open to hear the message, aren't they? That's
Yes.
really what it comes down to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a key. It's a key to a door. You're putting the key in the lock and you're opening the door. If you don't do that, then the door is locked. It's closed, and you're going to have to fight to get through that door.
We're just saying goodbye to Deborah. Thanks, Deborah.
Bye, Deborah.
See you next week.
What I think is interesting as well, Dorian, this conversation is, and bringing the idea of context, is how we should create the context of multi-generational conversations. Because if it's just about, well, I don't know, let's just talk, it's a bit difficult, it's off-putting. Talk about what?
Yeah. That's right. You're absolutely right. And that's the challenge. The challenge is to create something that gives a context. And of course, a short film would be brilliant. You know, a short film is easy to absorb. It's quick. It leaves lasting images and impressions in the mind better than words. Yeah. And something like that could be very powerful to go out to within a company where the culture is either good, bad, or indifferent. Doesn't really make any difference which type of company it is. But if you went with a short teaser context about how we can harness the diversity between the upper age levels and the lower age levels, how can we harness that? How can we work together? How can we gain? How can the company gain? And how can the individuals gain? Because without that, if it's just the company, you can forget it.
Yeah. And it goes back to that comment you made, Tatiana, about harvesting the differences. Yes. That's sticking in my head. Elsabe, you've been here as our support, you know, and thank you, because neither Tatiana or I would have been able to do this without you today. But I want to ask you, because you've been listening and I see the nodding and acknowledgement, but can you share a thought that you have hearing what has been shared today?
You know what, I really, what really struck me was the context for the training, and I can totally relate to that. Of course, when I was still working in retail, when I was now getting older, and they would do these trainings, and you would like, why do I have to do this? I've been here for 30 odd years. I don't think there's a lot you can teach me right now. You know, not that you want to be negative, but it's like, oh, Lord, not again. So I think that, but I also think that context is very important even for the younger people, because I could see it with the younger ones. Yes, they want to learn and they want to move up and they want to move forward. But sometimes they would also like, why am I going to do this? Why? I know you want me to do it, but why? So yes, to a certain degree, it's for them as well. And I think if everybody just does that, more people will buy into the training. And I think there will be more commitment from their side when they actually do the training, as opposed to just sitting there and how many more hours, how many, you know what I'm saying? So that really struck me. And I think a lot more people can actually adopt and adapt to that philosophy, because I think that will just make such a huge difference in the workplace.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you, Elsabe. Yeah. It was for me really an aha moment. And Diane, last words as we leave, enter into the last 5 minutes of our talk.
It's really just so great to hear us talking about this, because it's such a big subject. And how can we overcome this in big organizations when we need to harvest the different stages of life?
Yeah.
it's not a one size fits all. That would be my
Definitely
last
not.
comment
No.
on it. Tatiana, I'm going to turn over to you.
My final thoughts are with the context, and I love to think about what context we give to every other conversation we're gonna have from now on, because I just feel that you cannot not think about it once you be made aware of it. And I think that is the key to make the most of what could be quite negative, which are differences, in a positive way. Understanding what is the solution island that we're going to go to and you want to live, and how we can make that happen with the different tools we bring to the party.
Yeah, for sure. And Dorian, for you, a last thought?
Well, that's a rather selfish one, but how refreshing it's been to have a conversation with like-minded individuals, because I tend to live in my little cocoon these days, and or in my man cave, and so on. So it's really nice to be stimulated to think again, and to be stimulated to recall the things that that I learnt along the way that put me into a good place, and to be able to share those with others is very satisfying, but also very flattering. So thank you very much indeed for that.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And our thanks to you. And Dorian is a member as well, for those that are watching or listening to this, also at a later date. He's a member on the Wize Move Society. It's this kind of wisdom that we're really looking to bring. Dorian, you mentioned that we might not necessarily become wiser, but I do believe that we have a richness of wisdom that we can impart to our peers, and also all generations, so that we can fit the puzzle pieces together in a beautiful way, and this is what we really are looking to achieve with the Wize Move Society and the founding company, Move into the Future, that Ingen has founded. So I'm going to thank everybody. Thanks for your input, Diane. Wonderful to have your HR perspective as well, and Tatiana as always, and Elsa B. Thank you.
My pleasure.
We couldn't have done this without you.
We couldn't have done without you. And Mary Jane, thank you for stepping in and hosting today.
Oh, you're welcome. I really enjoyed it. And Dorian, I'm glad, because we know each other outside of the Wize Move Society, but wonderful to hear your thoughts on this as well. So
thank you.
Everybody, thank you. And have a great rest of the week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
Bye for
Bye
now.
bye, everybody. Bye bye. Bye bye.